You can still hear the ocean if you stand there long enough. Not the crash of waves, but something quieter. A pulse beneath the water, like it remembers. There's a dock at Maragota Bay, worn down to splinters. Its wooden slats sun-bleached, weather-beaten, and bowed by time. Fishermen don't linger there anymore. Not since that morning, the one they don't talk about. Except in whispers, when the wind is just right and the tide draws in strange things. That morning, the sea gave something back. A heavy, black plastic sack, torn by the barnacled edge of a net. Inside 6 backpacks, child-sized, still bright with color, as if they'd just been packed, as if the children were still nearby. But no children ever came for them. No footsteps raced down the dock. No names were called into the salt air. Only silence. And the slow, careful hands of a woman who once knew those bags by heart, touching each one like a ghost might touch a photograph left behind. The kind of silence that comes after something no one can undo. You see, people remember the disappearance. They remember the news vans and the candlelight vigils. But what they don't remember, what they've chosen to forget, is the place it all began. Not at the ocean, not at the school, but at a barn, on a hill, where the corn grew too tall and the quiet stretched too long, where something was hidden in plain sight. And if you listen closely, really listen, you might still hear their names in the wind. Because this story isn't over, not yet. It begins with what the barn was hiding. Dana Elwood hadn't spoken much since it happened. Not really. She answered questions when she had to, nodded politely at grocery clerks who still whispered behind her back. But the part of her that once laughed with children, who wore glitter on her cheeks and read corduroy aloud like it was Shakespeare, that part had fallen silent. It had been 8 weeks. 8 weeks since she brought 15 kindergarteners on what was supposed to be a farewell field trip to a sleepy little farm in Greenhorn Hills. 8 weeks since she rode that rickety school bus down the winding road, her clipboard in hand, humming nervously under her breath. The sun had been bright that day. The air smelled like cut grass and honeysuckle. She remembered thinking, they're going to love this place. They never came back. 15 small voices vanished into a field of corn. 2 of her colleagues, Lorraine Briggs, all warmth and girls and checklists. And Coach Tom, who made the kids laugh even when they were crying, also disappeared that day. Not a single scream, not a single trace, just gone. The farmhouse Dana had stepped into to sign off on the paperwork might as well have been a mausoleum. She hadn't known then that every second she lingered in that office was a second lost. That when she walked out the door with a receipt in hand, the only thing left was an empty field and a silence that never ended. There were no signs of struggle, no trails, no answers. Just the kind of mystery that eats away at you when no one is watching. At first, they called it a mistake. Maybe the group had wandered off. Maybe someone had gotten confused. But after hours turned into days, after search teams combed the property and helicopters circled the skies, it stopped being a question of where. It became a question of why. Dana stayed quiet, holding on to what little remained. A photograph clipped to her sun visor. 15 children smiling up at her, eyes wide with the kind of hope that hadn't yet learned to be afraid. She still looked at that photo every morning, still whispered their names before she put the car in drive. Because grief like hers wasn't loud. It was quiet, methodical, like a clock ticking through a dream you can't wake from. And then, the sea gave something back. Not a body, not a confession, but something stranger. A plastic bag, black, thick, slick with seawater, caught in the net of a local fisherman off Matagorda Bay. It bobbed to the surface like a secret, too heavy to stay buried. Inside were 6 backpacks. Bright red, sky blue, sunset orange. Still vivid, still clean, almost untouched by time. Dana's breath caught the moment she saw them. Her hands trembled, reaching with the kind of reverence you'd give to bones. Each backpack had been weighed down with rocks, not bricks, not chains. Just enough to sink, not enough to hide forever. She recognized them immediately. The colors, the stitching, the tiny fabric dinosaur patch sewn onto Noah's, the pink butterfly zipper on Zoe's. These weren't just bags. They were stories, little worlds. And someone had tried to drown them. She opened one, the blue one. Inside, a small white label sewn along the lining. Alvin Torres written in permanent marker. She had helped him spell it that day. Had handed him the marker herself. The detective beside her didn't speak. He didn't have to. Dana could feel it in her bones. These bags hadn't been in the water for 8 weeks. The fabric wasn't bloated. The zippers weren't rusted. The seawater hadn't had time to take them apart. That wasn't just evidence. It was a message. Something deliberate, calculated. Someone had kept these bags, stored them, waited. And then, for reasons she couldn't yet name, they chose to let them surface. The detective said as much, his voice low, his eyes scanning the bay like it might spit up more truths. They weren't anchored well. If it was meant to disappear forever, it would have. But Dinah wasn't listening anymore. Her gaze drifted toward the horizon, where the ocean met sky in a gray blur. Something inside her shifted. Not hope, it was too early for that. Something older, something darker. The kind of feeling you get when a locked door creaks open and you realize you've been standing outside it for far too long. Because the backpacks weren't proof of an ending. They were the beginning of something else, something worse. And from somewhere behind that silence came a sound she hadn't heard in years. The sound of footsteps. Too slow, too careful, too close. The story wasn't over. Not by a long shot. It was too quiet. That kind of quiet you only notice in places that once held laughter. The kind of quiet that follows after. Dana stood at the edge of the farm, where the gravel drive melted into fields, and the air smelled of dust and sun-scorched earth. The corn had grown taller since the day they vanished, a swaying wall of green that whispered when the wind passed through, like it was still trying to speak. She hadn't planned to come back. Not alone. But something about the backpacks, about the way they resurfaced after all that time, pulled her here, back to the place where time had folded in on itself, where she'd last seen those 15 children skipping toward the cornfield with sticky fingers and sun hats too big for their heads. Banner's farm. It looked the same. And that's what made her stomach turn. Nothing should look this untouched after so much had been lost. She parked at the edge of the lot, gravel crackling beneath her tires, and stepped out slowly, the door groaning behind her. The sun beat down like an accusation. The house stood in the distance, pale, wooden, and tired its shutters, casting long shadows across the porch. But it was the barn that drew her eyes. Red, weathered, still locked. She walked toward it, each step softer than the last, as if she might disturb something sleeping just beneath the soil. The barn door was shut tight with a heavy padlock, the kind meant to keep more than just animals out. She knelt by the edge, where the wood met the dirt, and that's when she saw it. A feather. Long, slender, too vibrant for this dry patch of Texas farmland. Blue with a shimmer of green and flecks of gold, not like the feathers of any sparrow or crow that roamed these skies. It glowed faintly in the dust, like a shard of something that didn't belong. Dana reached for it, brushing away the dirt, careful not to crush it. It was soft, silken, and utterly foreign. She stared at it for a long moment, her breath catching, because it wasn't just out of place. It was wrong. It didn't belong to this farm. Didn't belong to this country. She had taken her class bird watching every spring. She knew the feathers of mockingbirds, cardinals, hawks. This wasn't from any bird that lived in Texas. It was beauty where it shouldn't be, and that made it terrifying. Dana slipped it into her pocket, her fingers lingering just a second longer than necessary. A piece of a puzzle she hadn't even known existed. But before she could step back, a voice cut through the heat. "You lost." She turned sharply. Darrell Quantero stood a few yards behind her, wiping his hands on a rag. The sleeves of his flannel rolled high despite the heat. He'd aged not much, but enough. The same sun that had weathered the barn had kissed his face too, pulling lines at the corners of his mouth. "Didn't expect you back," he said, walking closer. Dana forced a tight smile. Didn't plan on it. Just needed to see it again. "Lot of people say that," he muttered. "Then change their minds once they're here." His eyes flicked toward the barn door just briefly, but she caught it. Darrell hadn't been working the day the class vanished. At least that's what he claimed. Said he'd stepped away to grab a presentation folder. Said it was only for 10 minutes. but 10 minutes can last forever. She followed him toward the farmhouse, pretending not to notice how he kept glancing back. Inside, it was cooler, but no less heavy. The walls were lined with old family portraits, each one yellowed at the edges, smiles frozen in time. A coffee pot murmured somewhere in the kitchen. Flies buzzed around a half-open window. And then her gaze landed on it. The watch. On Daryl's wrist, sleek black, with a deep blue backlight that flickered every few seconds. The same watch Coach Tom had worn the week before the trip. He'd shown it off during recess, proud of how it tracked his steps, how he could use it to time the kids during sprints. Dana didn't say a word. Her eyes dropped lower. The shoes. White with distinct blue stripes. Lightweight running shoes, the kind Tom swore by. Said they were perfect for field days and farm visits. But they weren't on Tom's feet now. Daryl followed her gaze. Picked them up at a market last month, he said casually, shifting slightly. Pretty comfortable, actually. Dana nodded slowly, her throat tight. The watch, the shoes, the feather in her pocket. None of it added up. But all of it pointed to the same thing. This place had never stopped hiding something. And the man standing in front of her, he wasn't just part of the story. He was inside it, still smiling, still talking, still trying to sound like a man who just happened to be there. But her body knew before her mind did the slight tilt of her balance, the way her hands wouldn't stop twitching at her sides. Something was off. The silence here wasn't natural. It was engineered. Built like a fence. And she had just stepped past it. What came next didn't feel real at first. There was a hallway Dana hadn't walked since that day. Wooden floorboards groaned beneath her steps slower now, more deliberate. The farmhouse had always felt worn, but tonight, it felt like something rotting beneath the paint. She waited until Daryl stepped out, said something about needing to meet a supplier in town. Banner wasn't home either. His old truck was gone, and the clock on the mantel struck 6 in that dry, hollow way that made time feel like it had stopped moving. Dana moved quickly. She passed the dusty coat hooks, the framed newspaper clipping about the farm's harvest boom in the 90s, a wall calendar still stuck in April, the week of the field trip, circled in red ink, like someone had meant to tear it down, but never did. Daryl's office was just past the staircase, tucked beneath the bones of the house like a secret. The door creaked when she pushed it open. Inside, low light, one window half curtained, the other boarded from the outside. It smelled like ash and old paper. Then she saw it. The fireplace. Smoke curled up lazily from a bed of embers. At first glance, it looked ordinary, just kindling and blackened wood. But as she stepped closer, the glow deepened. Bright orange flame licked at a pile of paper. Receipts, files, printouts. She grabbed the iron poker by the hearth and stirred the edges, hoping for something not yet destroyed. A page curled away from the rest, scorched but still legible. Livestock shipment, private dock, Corpus Christi, May 3rd. 3 days after the field trip. Dana froze. The word livestock should have made sense here. It was a farm, after all. But something about it felt wrong. Forced. A placeholder for something no one wanted to name. She turned toward the desk. Papers were stacked in messy piles, and near the bottom, more receipts. Faint ink, recent dates, handwritten notes in the margins. Her hands moved faster than her brain now, flipping through one, then another, her heart racing louder than her footsteps. Then a thump behind her. She spun. Daryl, standing in the doorway, hands at his sides, expression unreadable. "You lost, Mrs. Elwood." His voice was too calm, too smooth, like someone rehearsing a lie. Dana swallowed. "I was just looking for a restroom. Door was open." Daryl took a slow step inside, gaze drifting to the fireplace behind her. His eyes flicked to the poker in her hand, then back to hers. "You know," he said softly, "some things are better left burned." Before she could move, he lunged. The poker clattered to the floor. She fought, elbowed him hard, twisted, but he was stronger, not enraged, just methodical, cold, like this wasn't the first time. He didn't scream, didn't threaten, just dragged her through the house, her shoes scraping wood, her breath catching with every step. Out the side door, across the gravel lot, toward the barn. The sun had dropped behind the trees now, long shadows stretched like fingers across the field. He unlocked the padlock in silence. The heavy door creaked open, revealing darkness. It took her eyes a second to adjust. Then she saw them. Cages. Dozens. Stacked and spaced along the walls. Some empty. Some covered in tarp. Some moving. Feathers. Bright, unnatural blues. Reds. Golds. Mismatched. Ragged. A peacock limped in a corner crate, its tail half-torn, eyes vacant. A reptile of some kind coiled in the shadows, its scales gleaming dully under a single flickering bulb. And then a shoe, small, blue, half buried in hay. Dana stopped breathing. It wasn't just a barn. It was a holding pen. For animals, for something else. "You shouldn't have come back," Daryl muttered. He reached for a leather strap hanging from the wall. Dana's voice cracked. "What is this?" He didn't answer. He bound her wrists, ankles, gagged her before she could scream. His face didn't change. Once. No rage. No pleasure. Just procedure. "Truck'll be here soon," he said. "They'll know what to do with you." Dana struggled, kicked. Her heel struck a metal rung hard enough to bruise. It didn't matter. He hauled her into one of the empty cages in the back, locked it tight. She clawed at the bars, breath ragged, heart slamming against her chest like it wanted out. Daryl knelt by the cage, looked her dead in the eyes. "You weren't supposed to see this," he whispered. Then he stood, took her phone from her pocket, pulled out the folded receipt she'd tucked away, flipped it once, then slid it into his back pocket. A second later, he disappeared through the barn door. Dana was alone. Except she wasn't. A soft whimper came from somewhere nearby. She turned her head, eyes scanning the cages. In the far corner, another crate, half covered in cloth. Movement inside. Breathing. But not animal. Human. She couldn't see the face. But she knew. She knew. One of them was still here. And the others, she had no idea. The wind shifted outside. The crunch of gravel. A truck engine low. Growling. Tires pressing into earth. The delivery had arrived. And this time, Dana was part of it. The walls of the cage felt closer now. Not just in size and temperature. In time, in intent. Dana lay curled on her side, wrists rubbed raw from the rope, chased tight from the gag that bit into her jaw. Her legs had gone numb from the awkward bend of her body in the metal crate. And through the slats of the barn door, she could see it. Headlights, 2, then 4. A large, unmarked truck rolled into the yard. It didn't idle. It waited. Engine ticking low, like it knew exactly what it was here for. Dana's fingers trembled as she searched her pocket again. She hadn't dared move too much. Not until now. By some miracle. Daryl had missed her backup phone. A smaller one. Not smart. Just smart enough. The screen flickered weakly in the dark, casting a ghostly glow across the hay-streaked floor. She had no time to think. With every ounce of strength left in her, she opened the text thread she'd left pinned at the top, Detective Silas, and quickly snapped a photo of the singed receipt. It was crumpled now, edges blackened, ink bleeding from sweat and soot. But the words were still there. Livestock shipment. My private dockyard, Corpus Christi. She typed only 3 more. I'm at Banner's, barn, help. Then she hit send. The phone vibrated, one signal weak, but enough. And just as her finger hovered over the power button to send her location, the cage door slammed open. A man she didn't recognize, heavy set, scar on his cheek, grabbed her by the arm and barked something in Spanish over his shoulder. 2 more men approached. One of them holding a syringe, the kind usually meant for sedating large animals. Dana thrashed, kicked. Her knee caught one of them in the shin, but it only delayed the inevitable. The needle sank into her shoulder. A sharp, icy burn followed, immediate, invasive. Her limbs turned to water. The phone slipped from her fingers. Keep her quiet, one of the men muttered. Boss said no loose ends. Her vision blurred as they wheeled her cage, lifted it with a hydraulic jack, locked it onto the back of the truck. Around her, other crates were loaded too, covered, shifting, breathing. The barn door closed behind them, and the dark swallowed everything. The drive felt endless. The inside of the truck was airless hot, filled with the sickly scent of sedated animals' sweat, urine, the faint metallic tang of blood. Dana's body slumped, but somewhere deep in the haze of her mind, she clung to a thread of consciousness. "They know where I am," she told herself. I sent it. But then the truck stopped. A new place. Dim. Cooler. Voices rose around her. Angry. Fast. And then silence again. Until sirens. Piercing. Splitting. Real. The sound cut through her stupor like glass. Doors burst open. Boots, shouts, flashlights strobed through slats in the truck. Then, voices in English. "Police, hands up, get down." The truck rocked. Men yelling, running. Gunmetal thuds, a scream. And then, light. The back of the truck swung wide open. One flashlight beam landed directly on her face. "There's someone here," a voice called. Then stronger hands, breaking the lock, pulling her into arms that smelled like sweat and Kevlar and urgency. "She's sedated. Get the EMTs." Dana tried to speak, but her mouth wouldn't obey. She heard her own voice like it came from underwater. Her eyes rolled back, the ceiling spinning above her. But in that brief window before the sedative dragged her under, she saw it. Inside the warehouse, rows of cages, most with animals, some with toys. A small plush rabbit, a pink shoe, a coloring book, a child's drawing taped to the inside of a crate, and movement. A tiny figure behind a mesh wall, then two, then more. One child looked up dazed, dirty, eyes wide and searching. And even through the fog, Dana recognized the face. Alvin Torres, one of hers, still alive. The floor tilted again. Dana felt herself slipping, her mind folding in on itself. But the last thing she heard, just before everything went black, was a boy's voice calling out through the chaos. "Miss Elwood." And for the first time in 8 weeks, she let herself believe. They hadn't all been lost. Not yet. The hospital room was quiet, except for the soft hiss of oxygen and the rhythmic blip of a heart monitor. Dana blinked up at the ceiling, white tiles swimming in and out of focus. Her body felt like it was wrapped in wool, her mind moving just slightly ahead of the pain. A nurse adjusted her IV and murmured something gentle, something about hydration, recovery, rest. But Dana didn't hear it, because she remembered the voice. Alvin's voice, calling her name from inside a cage. She turned her head slowly. On the bedside table, her phone buzzed once, lighting up with a message from Detective Silas. She didn't need to read it to know what it meant. They had answers now, or at least some of them. By nightfall, she was sitting upright, clothed, shaky but alert, as Silas led her into a quiet room at the station. The blinds were drawn. A file sat thick and waiting on the desk. He closed the door gently. "What we found," he said, voice low, "will stay with me for the rest of my life." He didn't look at her right away. Instead, he flipped open the folder. 13 of the children are safe, he said. Dana's breath caught. They were found sedated, but unharmed, malnourished, confused, scared, but alive. He waited a beat before continuing. "We're working with trauma counselors, medical teams, social services. Their families are here. Many are already reunited." Dana's hands trembled in her lap. But then Silas paused. "And the others," she whispered. He looked up. Jalen Washington was struck by one of the smugglers' trucks during the initial abduction. He died at the scene. They buried him somewhere near the service road behind the cornfield. Dana closed her eyes. Jalen, the boy who loved dinosaurs, who couldn't sit still unless he was drawing, who once asked her if clouds ever got lonely. And Mela Patel, Silas continued, his voice gentler now, suffered a severe asthma attack during the first transfer. They didn't give her an inhaler. They didn't even try. Dana's hand flew to her mouth. "She was just 6, she whispered. "I know." He gave her time, let the silence stretch and hold the weight of those names. And the teachers she asked eventually, her voice was steadier than she expected. Lorraine Briggs and Coach Tom Reyes were executed early on, likely within hours of the disappearance. The smugglers saw them as liabilities. They were buried in the desert, not far from the warehouse. "We've recovered their remains." Dana nodded slowly, eyes brimming. "They were good people," she said, her voice breaking. "They loved those kids." Silas's jaw tightened. They deserved better. He stood, walking to a whiteboard on the far wall, where a map of the region was marked in red and blue pins. He tapped a pin near Corpus Christi. The shrimp processing plant was a front, like the farm, like several other properties we've since traced. It was part of an international wildlife trafficking network, one of the largest we've ever seen. Jaguars, macaws, reptiles, birds with feathers that don't belong anywhere near Texas. Dana thought of the blue and gold plume still tucked into her jacket pocket. And when the market shifted, when animals stopped being enough, they started selling people. Silas turned, voice quieter now. "Children." He walked back toward her, holding out a sheet of paper, a manifest recovered from one of the smugglers' devices. Her students were listed there, not by name, by number, by age, by value. Dana didn't take the paper. She couldn't. Instead, she stared past it, her eyes clouded. All of it, just to make money. Silas nodded once. It always starts with money, but it never ends there. He sat across from her again, clasping his hands. We have Darrell Quantero and Clay Banner in custody. Darrell resisted arrest, tried to run. Banner cooperated. He claims he never knew the full extent, that he thought it was just rare birds, exotic animals, not children. Dana didn't respond because Banner had known something. Maybe not everything, but something. Enough to keep the barn locked. Enough to keep the feathers buried. Silas leaned in. There's one more thing. He pulled a small plastic evidence bag from the folder. Inside it, a pink hair clip shaped like a butterfly. Dana's breath hitched. Zoe's, she said, almost inaudible. Silas nodded. We found it on the floor of the warehouse, near the cages. It was one of the things that convinced us you were telling the truth before we even got there. Dana's fingers hovered over the plastic. The memory of Zoe, arms wrapped around her favorite stuffed bear, twisting that same clip into her hair before every recess, saying it made her feel like a fairy. They're not just kids, Dana said, her voice barely more than a whisper. They're stories. They're entire little worlds. Silas didn't speak. Because what could you say to that? The file sat open between them, the weight of the truth sinking deeper into the room. A school trip, a barn, a locked door, a feather too bright for this soil, and underneath it all, a trade in lives. The farm had once been a place of learning. Now, it was a scar, and Dana she would carry it forever. But 13 children were still breathing, and that meant something. It had to. Some wounds don't scream. They whisper like the breeze through a broken window, or the hush of small shoes that never made it home. Dana stood in that room, surrounded by voices she feared she'd never hear again. But even in their arms, even in their safety, the silence of two missing names hung in the air like a shadow no light could reach. Some truths were found, others still wait, buried beneath footsteps, feathers and dust. If this story stayed with you, let us know below. Like the video if your heart felt heavy, and subscribe for the next piece of the truth when it surfaces. We'll be here, waiting, listening in the dark.